This is Mr. Impact Wrestling himself, Moose, and you're listening to the Irish Whip.
Hookers? Hookers and Coke?
Hookers and Coke, man.
You're the only pro wrestler I know that wants to do this shit in the morning.
Yeti, you're a f***ing moron.
Put it this way, I think Sami Callihan might as well just change his name to Invader
I
One.
want to know why. Like, he can dodge any question. Like, I'll tell anyone that. You can tell me but I'm going to ask specific questions.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
WrestlingNewsSource.com. All the rest of you yahoos are out there dilly-dillying, you little wankers. We're actually receiving real wrestling news.
This is
Brett screwed Brett.
Who are you to doubt El Dandy? Because this guy's a serious professional.
Brett screwed Brett.
Hold 2! Arm bar!
Hey, get a nice shot of the brand new Mr. and Mrs. Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
I hate you. I hate you. I hate your hat. I hate your t-shirts. I hate your wristbands. I hate your shoes. I hate your music. I hate the C Nation. I hate everything that you stand for.
Sodas rule.
Yeah, they do.
What is up, TIW Mafia? It's Yeti. I'm hanging out here. I'm super excited. Kristen is back in the green room. She's listening to me talk all about her here real quick. We thought it fitting and we thought it was amazing because all her work and what she does specifically for women, it being International Women's Day, we were fortunate, lucky to get her and to have her here. She is, of course, a PWI staff contributor and co-owner of Bell to Bells. We read her work. We listen to the podcast. We are fans. So without further ado, Kristen, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, we wanted to do it for a very long time. We took a break. Like we've been doing this for 20 years, so we needed to take a step back. We needed to kind of focus on us and families and things because we've been grinding for so long. Yeah, and we're happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for all the kind words.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Bell to Bells, of course. You can be as lengthy as possible. Like I want to know how, why, when, where, and the struggles with it. Like that's kind of what that's the question I want to ask. Just introduce yourself and talk to me about Bell to Bells.
Sure. First off, I apologize right away. My eyes are so dry. I didn't sleep very well last night. So if you see me doing this, I'm sorry. So Bell to Bells came by. I used to be the editor-in-chief for Diva Dirt, and that was from 2018 to about mid-2019, so not incredibly long. And without diving into all the drama, it just basically wasn't what I wanted to cover. It covers all women's wrestling, but it wasn't approaching it how I wanted to approach it, which was advocacy. So I left Diva Dirt, and I really didn't plan on starting my own site. I was trying to get my footing with jobs and living alone, and I thought I just don't have time. And Lauren, who is another co-owner, she kept pushing me. We should start on site. And I'm like, Lauren, no, like I'm not, no. And then finally I'm like, okay, fine. The name Bell to Bells came from my fiance, who is the third co-owner, Warren Hayes. And we just built, and I was very lucky that at the beginning I had a huge support system. There were a lot of people behind me, both media members and fans. And so I'm incredibly lucky for that. We started off with like news, right? So like any other site. And then a lot of people had to drop off for various reasons. And we decided that we're never going to stand out as a news place. It's just never going to happen. There's so many sites that are already well established. It's fruitless. And so we recouped. We decided that we wanted to really focus on the advocacy part of it. Rather than, pushing out content and just being content mills, we really wanted to focus on the things that we really wanted to focus on. And so, struggles, I think we can all admit that, like you said, it's a daily battle. In 2020, even I considered quitting altogether. Sometimes you just feel like, who's listening? Is anyone listening? Is this worth it? Am I not paying attention to things in my own life because of it? is like imposter syndrome. Am I good? Is a waste of time. And I think we all really feel that. We take breaks. So, I decided to stay for other reasons, PWI and stuff. So I decided to stay. But then even I wasn't consistently posting. We did a lot of events, which was really fun, but it still was, personal life was really shaky. So there was still stuff going on in my personal life with school, multiple jobs. And so we took a break last July, and then we came back just now. So, it's just about being honest with yourself about what you can accomplish and what you can't. And like I said, I'm just really grateful that there's such a great community for women's wrestling and that I have so much backing, for sure.
Absolutely. And I guess we cheated, right? I usually cheat with individuals that are on our side of the wall. I don't cheat with talent. Like, I always make sure that, the questions I ask, I want to make sure that you're okay with them, because it's important. But the one I left out is, like, when did you know, like, I wanted to turn kind of my hobby into a passion, and then something that I want to make money at? Like, when did you come to that fruition?
I'll be honest, I don't make a lot of money.
None of us really do, right?
Zero money. PWI, there's some money, but that was never really, I mean, it would have been nice to have a job, but it was never really the end goal to make money, because you have to be honest with yourself around here. There's very few positions that you can make money, and typically they're not held by women. So I started consistently started watching wrestling about 2014. And that was still the Divas era. And I've always been somebody who really believes in like women's issues and empowerment. And so I came in 2014, and while it's not, 1999 by any stance, I thought, what is going on here? The men are they have the spotlight. They're so well built. The Divas division their matches are getting cut. And if they have matches, it's like 2 minutes. I've never been one to I've never been one to criticize anybody's sexuality. That's totally up to women, but the focus was on that and not on their athleticism. And I think the Divas division got a really bad rap. And part of that was just WWE wasn't spotlighting them and wasn't giving that right image. And I mean, immediately I went, there's something wrong here. And I remember going around, wrestling Twitter and all the websites, and just not seeing a lot of women. And the women that were kind of jaded. And I mean, it was clearly an issue that needed to be filled. And so I thought, okay, well, we could try. I was writing for not Daily DT. I was writing for another website for football. I was writing about Atlanta Falcons, and my editor there was like, I see you tweeting about wrestling. Do you want to join Daily DT? I'm not sure. And this was like 2018, so I'd been watching it. I'll admit I was totally one of those fans that didn't understand kayfabe at the beginning. I was like, I had this I just hated Alexa Bliss so much, but that's because I hadn't really established that these are people yet. Like, I wasn't in the business. I just responded to the characters. And so I joined Daily DT, and that all changed. And still, there wasn't a lot of women's coverage. And I'm lucky that Daily DT really was fair. My editor there was like, yeah, write about women's wrestling, write about what you want. And then I just, it was Diva Dirt. It was the same with PWI. I just put out tweets like, I want to write about women's wrestling. Who's hiring? And it just sort of steamrolled from there. And there wasn't a lot of people. There's still, I mean, it's getting better, but there wasn't a lot of people that really spoke out about, equality and equity. It was like fan sites, which is totally fine, and that's great. But there wasn't a lot of specific podcasts or websites that were really focusing on that. And I said, you know what? This is something I believe in. I believe, I wrote for sports for so long, that this is something that I want keep pursuing. So I enjoy it. Like I said, I wish I had more time for it. I definitely don't make a lot of money for it, but I think the passion behind everything is really what drives us, you know?
Right. Just not really, we don't ever really want to be in the know, but we want to be able to provide a platform to those that we feel are not only good talent, but good humans. Like we want to
Right.
be able to, I mean, for as long as we've done this, we've only missed one person that kind of came back to bite us. And that just, I mean, it
Mm.
wasn't really a reflection on us. It was just that person chose to make really poor decisions. So we're really careful about who we decide to have as guests on here when they're a younger talent, because
Right.
that's a huge risk for us to have. And
Right.
absolutely, it's I think it's really important for anybody out there thinking about it that they find a platform, and yours is specifically unique. What what's your favorite part of the PWI gig? What's your favorite part of that?
Um, I mean, covering women's wrestling, I think, well, I know up until, so Kevin, the editor, I think he got it like end of 2019, beginning of 2020. So like right before I started. And not that the magazine was bad before, but there wasn't a lot of women's focus. The women's list was 50. There wasn't the women's column. I mean, there was very little focus, and there wasn't a whole lot, if any, women on. I don't think there were any on the 500. And so he got on and he was like, "Look, we need to make this thing more indicative of the actual wrestling world of the fans too." And so when I came on, it was like, let's go. And I got a lot of opportunities, and that's great too. Is he will just give us things that that sort of build on our already expertise, I guess you can call, which is not. I don't consider myself an expert, but he takes what we all consider our area and then gives us stuff. And I think probably the coolest part of PWI is when I get to do the women's now 150, right? I mean, I was
Right.
there with that decision to make it 150 from 100. That was really cool. Part of my job as the co-pilot, as you know, so-called co-pilot, is that I get to not only rank, but I get to bring women in the fold, whether that be on the ranking committee, the features. I get to, I mean, this year I kind of had the faint idea of what the feature was, and Kevin really, you know, cemented it. But, you know, and I don't always get the final say. I'll say that. There are a lot of people I think that are like, oh, she gets to choose the committee, and that's not it at all. I mean, I will suggest people, and I would say 9 times out of 10 they're picked, but there have been times where I don't get the say. But that's really cool. I mean, there are people who have read PWI their entire life, and we get to sort of bring them on and represent women in all, you know, races, you know, categories, whatever, and really get to use them to advantage of what they watch. So I think of Karen Peterson, and she is so smart on Joshi and New Japan and Japanese wrestling, and we get to really tap into that and take advantage. So that's, I mean, the women's 150 is always going to be the coolest part. And I tell Kevin, you know, Shuri was number 1 last year, right?
Right.
And I said, if my career in wrestling ended today, that'd be enough. I could go on thinking at least, I mean, I got Shuri, part of, you know, the committee got Shuri at number 1. And it was the first Joshi talent in a Joshi company at that time, for Stardom talent at number 1. So if that's all I contribute to women's wrestling, that's good enough for me. So really, I mean, the funnest part of it is the women's 150. I do contribute to the 500, but less so. I go to the meetings, and I'm really just there to represent the women. And I have argued for women on there. Same thing with tag team, but I'm really, it's the 150 for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Backstory for me, and the fact that you referenced the Japanese wrestling, is that I spent 7 months over there while I was in the Marine Corps, and I was already a pro wrestling fan.
Yeah.
So that was my chance to be able to really experience a lot of that live. And it is such a different atmosphere, and how
Yeah.
they react to the talent in the ring, and what you're
Right.
supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. And later on, I became a huge Stardom fan, and that's where I fell in love with Masha. And
Yeah.
it's people like that and people like you that are shining a light on so much talent out there that we
Mhm.
really don't get a chance to see. And that, I mean, if you're subscribing to IWTV, or if you're
Right.
subscribing to Fight TV, or if you're seeing them in GCW or Beyond or PWG, or
Right.
whatever your pick is, it's all over the place. And
Yeah.
does that make it, I guess, does that make it easier when we have so much access
Yeah.
to the talent in the media? Because Sundays is my, like, that I spend all my time right now watching GCW and MLW. I don't
Yeah.
watch a whole lot of the product that's on TV,
Mhm.
just because I get more of the equality that you're speaking about in an
Right.
independent show than
Yeah.
I do on the stuff that's in there on television on a regular basis. It's just
Yeah.
how it is. Impact even does a really good job for me.
Right.
I got my buddy Mike Farrell. Mike Farrell from Chaos Theory Pod is
Oh,
here.
nice.
He's hanging out with us tonight. So I want to thank you for doing that. Like, the PWI 150 is huge for me, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
be 100% honest and real. I don't subscribe because I get my box with my teas and all that stuff. But every year, that is now the PWI 500 and the women's 150 they're the issues that I really look forward to,
Mhm.
because one, I want to read that and see if I'm in alignment in a lot of ways. Sometimes I'm not, and sometimes I am.
Yeah.
And I talk about this a lot. And that's just because my lens is, for context, my lens is Lufisto. That's my context and
Yeah.
my lens, because she's really the only. I mean, when I was so deep in CZW and ROH and all of this stuff, she was I watched her the first time,
Mhm.
and I could not. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, because it was one of those instances where this is the first time I'm seeing it. Like
Right.
when they had the best of the best tournament and
Mhm.
Tessa won that, and they tried to basically say that Tessa was the first best of the best when it was actually Lufisto, is one of those things. Like, rewriting history is what I have an issue with. That's
Right.
huge for me.
Right.
So the fact that you're doing what you're doing, and you're making history, you're making it. You guys are making history, and that's huge for fans like me that have just. Lufisto is huge for me.
Mhm.
She's influenced. That is the exact lens that I watch when I'm looking at people that I want to be entertained by. I'm not
Right.
there critiquing matches. I'm not there talking about how they miss spots and this and that. Like, I don't care. Like, I want to buy into the character, and I want to be able to watch it like you started watching it, where
Mhm.
you don't want to understand kayfabe. I want to get lost in the story. I want
Yeah.
to understand it. So with that, like, the follow up to the best, what's your least favorite part of PWI?
Which isn't really PWI's fault, but like kind of you touched on, like, you have a different view, and what your list might be doesn't align with our list. And I mean, I will say this nicely, duh, right? Like, of course, like, there are no, we're like 7 to 8 people. Where this is not, we're gonna do a tally of every single person's vote, because that would take forever, and it's really not necessary. So, I think though, I mean, and it's not everybody. I want to be clear, but there are some mean people out there. I mean, there are mean people, especially with the lists. I know with the 500, Mox wasn't very high, and people were so mean. So I'm sober, and so is Mox. And somebody had tweeted at Kevin, the editor, of, you're punishing Mox for going to rehab, which, like, I think people get this recency bias, right? They think, okay, well, but no, it's like ended months ago. Like, this is not like, it didn't end yesterday, because there's no way we would make this list yesterday. I mean, there's like publishing rules, right? So they said that to him, and then not knowing that, Kevin's got his own family issues, right? And I see it, and I tweet out, Like, that's ridiculous. I'm sober. We would never do that. And somebody had basically compared my alcoholism to his spot on the list, and not a very nice way. And I'm like, God, like, people really take the list very seriously, and I totally get it. But it's important to remember that 99% of the wrestlers don't take it that seriously. They really don't. A lot of them, I mean, they're ones who sit at 500 and they're so excited that they're at 500. And for me, the list is about, especially the 500. I haven't heard of a lot of these people. I haven't heard of them. So I'm like, oh, cool. I see all their contributions. Now let me go find their matches. So there is some, they're not a lot that's extreme, but I do get a lot of complaints around list season that are just not nice. So I think that's the worst part, because I mean, the writing and the actual, the PWI stuff is really great, but there is a lot of pushback, whether it be the awards or the lists or whatever. And I mean, like I said, there's 7-8 people. We do our best. We have I haven't, but there have been people who have been forgotten, and we're humans. And it's not personal. It's just, we have criteria that we have to follow. So definitely those livid fans are not my favorite part.
Mike, I know you got a question, man. I can see it in your face.
Well, it's not really a question. My thing is, I'm a big fan and big proponent now, especially having a daughter, of women's wrestling. To the point that my first guest ever on my podcast was Jasmine Allure.
Cool.
Fantastic. Do you, and again, obviously I jumped in late, so I don't know what Yeti already asked, but do you foresee doing a women's only 500?
I mean, I've done it for Bell to Bell. We have to be careful, because in the branding for that has to be careful, because we don't want people to confuse that with PWI's list. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, because it can be done. And that's part of the reason why I did it for Bell to Bells, was because we wanted to prove to the people, there's not 500 women. Of course there are. So we wanted to prove that in a way, but it's difficult, because every year we're kind of updating these lists, and we have to be careful about it. And there are a lot of people who say wanted to combine them, and I'll tell you that's not very smart, because of systematic ways that women are being handled. They're never gonna equal out to the men. The men are always gonna rank higher because of everything, right? Match time, titles, all that stuff. And so you're gonna see less women. So eventually, I mean, when I started, it was 100, but before that it was 50. And then it became 100, and then it became 150. And every year it gets really hard. We're always leaving off people that were like, oh, this person's so good. Especially with the indies, we find that we're always leaving people off. Or, especially at the end of the list, we're like, oh my God, who do we keep? Who do we not? And like I said, there is a good month or so before it goes to print that we then keep track. So typically you don't see a lot of movement, but at the end of the list, you might move someone off or add somebody or whatnot. And it gets harder and harder. And so eventually it probably will move up. I can't really speak on behalf of PWI for that. But I mean, it just gets so hard. And that's why we went to 150. Yeah.
I think would be really cool is I'm a huge fan of WoW magazine from the early 90s.
You just aged the shit out of yourself.
I know, man, right? Huge.
WoW magazine. People
like even just
people right now are like, what the hell is a magazine?
Well, I know what a magazine is. I mean,
dude,
I'm 36. Let's not get it wrong.
Me too.
The pull-out posters were in my son's room. I mean, that's what I look forward to. Is like when that WoW magazine showed up, he was like, I want the posters.
Yeah.
And anyway, the reason I bring that up is because do you ever feel like, or have you guys ever thought about, and I didn't put this on there because I just thought about it, have you ever thought about doing your PWI 150 and then a fan's PWI 150 and like a dual issue where one's on one side and one's on the other?
I think, well, first off, when we do the awards, the fan awards, there's really not enough people that respond. I mean, it's really not that much, but there's always people that have this opinion, right? They got this opinion when the awards come out, but they're not placing the votes. And so I don't know. I think it would be really hard. I think people don't understand the criteria as well. I said there's recency bias. I think you'd have to be very clear on the criteria, and then we'd have to go back and check the criteria. And I think that would be honestly a lot of work. And I do think if you're a fan out there and you want to make a list, do it. Like, I think that's great. And I think it's amazing that fans have the passion that they're going to complain about the list, because it means they care. And we all have our favorites, and whether they belong on the top, fans are going to do it, right? And so we have a very, very tight criteria. We spend hours and hours on these lists. You know, we start off with a 4-hour call for women's 150, and then we have email chains and other calls and all this stuff. So I think it would be really hard, and everybody would have a different number one, guaranteed.
Oh
So
yeah,
I think it would be really hard.
there's too many good women. There's too many good wrestlers out now for everybody. I think the cool thing about wrestling now is it's kind of reverting back to the territory days, where indies are picking, like, Yeti doesn't have an indie to go see out in the frozen tundra that he lives in.
Yellowstone, Montana.
Yeah.
But I live in San
That's up
Antonio.
there.
I live in San Antonio. I have Thunder
Oh,
Rose's
yeah.
independent company. I have River City Wrestling. I have probably between 7 and 10 independent promotions just in my city.
Yeah.
That's not including the entire state of Texas.
This is great. Yeah.
So
You suck.
do you see kind of a difference in what you're seeing from fans regionally? Like, do you see, like, okay, I'm a huge fan of this group from Michigan called the Death Threat Army.
Okay.
Do you see, like, when you interact with fans or you see on social media, do you see a more like, hey, this guy's from my AO, or he works Texas really well, or he does this? Do you see the regional pockets trying to force their guy up, or is it still like, hey, WWE and Impact or WWE and AEW are the go-to product?
I mean, I think there's so many indies now that I don't think the top promotions are necessarily like the top product. Like, you know, NWA was one of the top products for so long, and now it's like, you know, so I think when you're talking like women's wrestling, the indies have so much more. Now, with women's wrestling, it's not as easy to stay in territories as it is men's, right? Because there's not enough women. So, you know, I wrote a column on West Coast Pro Wrestling, and when you look at that, not many just stick around West Coast. You have to move around. I live pretty close to Chicago. I live in Wisconsin, and it's got its own scene, right? And I think every territory or pocket has very unique styles, very unique trainers, and I think wrestlers kind of stick to whatever they want. But I even see, like, especially women's wrestling promotions, they're bringing in people from all over because that's the draw, really. And it can be troublesome, right? If you're getting the big people, like maybe for Impact, because they allow their people to go to indies, then there's a lot of indie women that are not being used. So I mean, I think for men, I'm thinking of like the South, the Southeast, the West Coast, Texas, Chicago. They're building Midwest. They're building these guys up because there's just so many guys. Like, there's just so many, or even internationally, right? There's so many, but the women have to travel around. At least for the last like 5-6 years, there's just not enough matches. So, you know, and I had talked to Ruby Reyes for my last column, and that's what she said basically was, there's, you know, the West Coast is very long, and there's not a lot of women's matches, and there's a ton of women wrestlers. So they have to travel. They have to go around because it's really hard for those women to stay in one spot. There's still a ton of work to do, even in the indies, to build more matches. So for men, yeah, absolutely, but not for women.
Not for women.
No.
I think, you know, it's so funny. I'm like Yeti. I was in the military. I was a wrestling fan in the military. One of very few that was open about his fandom in the military. But it was a different, like, when I was in the military and watching wrestling, it was, I wanted to watch Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, the guys, the big whoop that ass kind of guys. But now I'm 36. I have a daughter. the style of wrestling that I like now is completely different. Like I love going and watching like the Renegade Twins, Lufisto, Lady Frost. Genocide is my daughter's absolute favorite woman right now. She loves Genocide.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think I think you're 100% right when you say everybody still has a ginormous amount of work to do as far as advancing women's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of trips me out as just a fan, as somebody who does a podcast about wrestling, is the fact that like people saw women main event WrestleMania twice, and they still think women can't do it. And I'm like, you understand? They sold out the biggest wrestling show in the world.
Yeah.
So what do you think it's going to take for independence? I mean, if women main eventing WrestleMania isn't doing it, I don't know what will. But what do you think it's going to take for more independent promotions to put like a 3 or 4 women's matches on instead of maybe one? Right. What do you think is going to take to facilitate that?
Well, it's the same thing that it would take for TV promotions for them to care, right? And I think, there's always excuses like from NWA, cough, that there's not enough women. Oh my God, there's more than enough women. But it takes them to want to. And a lot of will say, oh, they don't draw, which I think for indies, it's harder to determine that. So I don't understand how any indie promotion could really say that. But I mean, they can obviously tell gate, right? And so like I think of GCW or PWG, like never has women on. They might have 1 or 2, right? And so there's no reason, especially when you think of PWG. I mean, Candice LeRae made herself there, right? Like she was fighting the Young Bucks. And so I don't get it. TV promotions though, it's so I feel like, like AEW, it's not easy, right? I'm not a promoter. I'm not gonna sit there and womansplain how to do this, right? Because there's no, I mean, he already padded the men's roster so much that like he'd have to let people go, and so you're also not using the women that you have. So there's really no easy answer, but it's all systematic. I mean, these are things that it's not new. And, I did stats for last year and nobody is getting where they should. I mean, it's so bad. I think like for matches, like for a percentage of total matches over the year, I think NXT did the best. No, one of the darks at 38%. That's the highest. I mean, and there was one, and I won't call him out, was 18%. Oh my God. Like
18% women's match. That's disgusting.
And, you're right there. I think especially with WWE, their women are such stars in and outside of wrestling that like the fact that they don't think they can main event is crazy. And then you see AEW, just some random dynamites and Jamie Hayter and Cheetah or whoever is pulling it out, like just insane. And so I think when people say women can't wrestle, I think what's happening is main events, their bias and their opinion is showing, and that's okay. You don't have to like women's wrestling, but then don't say they can't do it because they have over and over and over again. So yeah, I mean, there's no good way.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but here's where I think it starts at the top. If you're going to look at the top, my opinion, WWE stands at the top, followed by AEW. You can throw Impact, MLW. You can throw the tier goes down to the independents, whether it's Beyond or PWG or Defy or wherever. Like you have your territories, ROW down in Texas, all of that. You have that. Mm-hmm. But I think it starts at the top when you have as much money and who you are as the WWE, and you have focused so much on being the pioneers. Like I didn't miss an episode of NXT for 5 years, and I watched Bayley, and I watched all of the 4 horsewomen just mature. And yeah, they were at first it was like, man, it was cringeworthy at times. It really was. But being able to watch them mature and become legitimate superstars now, why have they not taken advantage of that and have an all women's show? Like just do it on the network. Just do it on the network. I mean, I don't know if you're worried about, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? It's absolutely going to work. It is 100% going to work because you can focus people say pro wrestling saturated. Yeah, sure, it's saturated. But if you are a fan of that, you're going to watch it. You're going to invest in it. You're going to understand the opportunity that exists there, especially since they don't do. This may be wrong of me to say, but it's all intergender matches. They can't do them in the WWE, and I get it. I understand it. Like I absolutely get it. I agree with it in a lot of aspects. Some of the parts of it I don't like, because I enjoyed watching, Masha and GCW go in the ring, with a guy, and that's just kind of stuff where it breaks down stereotypes, it breaks down walls, it breaks other things, but also kind of encourages others. So it's tough for me, but I don't, for the life of me, understand. I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Why a company has not yet decided, even if it's just an hour, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Like,
they did that.
I mean, what am I wrong?
They did that Evolution show with WWE. That was, they had big names in it. They had big superstar women names, but the show was booked like shit. Like, the orders of matches didn't work. It didn't flow. Like, their first match, banger. Second match, not great. Third match, banger. And then it was like off and on the entire. So I think the NWA one was not horrible because Mickey was
amazing.
Mickey was booking it. I think if you're going to do an all women show, it has to be booked by a woman. Because as a man, look, Triple H is one of the greatest wrestling minds in the history of the business. It's been said by millions of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you let Triple H book an all women show, it's going to look like a men's show.
Yes,
because
100%.
Triple H is a man, and he wrestles a certain style and he books a certain style. Now, I will say, in my opinion, he's the best booker of women's matches in WWE's history. Period. The way he built Sasha and Charlotte and Becky and Bayley, Ember Moon, Asuka. I mean, Triple H has booked them the best. I think what it's going to take, just in my opinion, is it's going to take Mercedes Moné. People in the States are going to see how ginormous she's going to get in Japan.
Dude.
Because Tony Khan's watching, Triple H is watching, Impact is watching, whoever owns Impact now is watching. They're going to see that international pull, and they're going to be like, oh, fuck, we are missing out on millions and millions and millions of dollars. Because when she when she went in and made her entrance, just her debut, it was the biggest thing in wrestling for like a week.
Yeah.
A woman did that. And she's only wrestled for one other company. But she, off the power of the hard work and the ass kicking and the traveling and marriage and all the stuff that she's been through to Japan, she's the biggest number one name in Japan right now. And I think this is her first time wrestling in Japan. How insane is that? It's insane. She's the biggest thing almost in the entire country. Because Bullet Club has pretty much gone away.
Yeah. So, Kristen, do you think that somebody could do like a show? Could it be successful? Do they have, I mean, Sarah Del Rey is huge. I mean, that's, if I'm going to have anybody do anything, she's going to be the head of it for me. But do you, in your inner sanctum and circle of this, like, is this ever a conversation at all about why somebody hasn't stepped up and started doing this, specifically the brand at the top?
All the time, every day. And the reason they don't do Evolution 2 is, from what I heard at least, is that it didn't bring in any money, which I think is insane. And I think you're right. I think when they did it in 2018, they don't have the roster they do now. So that was right before all these NXT women came up, right? So, maybe it could be better now. I think there's a lot of women that are on the main roster now that were pulled. Like, you think of Nikki Cross, she's pulled from the UK. You think of all these women who had illustrious careers way before WWE.
Oh yeah.
Kaylee Ray was, she's amazing. Piper Niven. These are all women who had long careers away. So it could probably be better now, right? But that would depend on who's booking in. AEW, they would just have to do it. They would just have to do it. Right now, they don't have enough women. But you know what? They did Forbidden Door.
True.
Like, I don't understand if they really can't get a partnership with Stardom, but they could easily get one with TJPW. In fact, I know that they have gotten women from them, right? So what? So, I mean, I know they could, but they would have to do it. And I will tell you, and I'm not going to tell you who told me, but there's somebody within the company who flat out said the ratings are shit, and we're for the women, and the ratings are terrible. And yeah, I mean, you put them at a certain hour, and you don't teach your fans to appreciate women's wrestling, they're not going to, right? So that's their fault. NWA Empower was incredible. It did better than the next day, which was their anniversary show. It did better. And I was there for both as media. And the first night for Empower was so hot. The crowd was so hot. There wasn't a bad match on that card. It was all booked to perfection. You know, like for instance, my favorite match from that was Camille versus Layla Hirsch. And you're like, okay, this is going to be an easy win for Camille, right? She's like a foot taller than Layla. And no, it was such an incredible match. And there were so many incredible people on that. And you're like, this can happen. Mm-hmm. But they're not interested. I mean, Billy Corgan has made it very clear that he's not interested in this. He doesn't think any women are NWA worthy when there was a whole card of women. So yeah, I think they could do it. And I think of like, I know you say like women would be best, and I believe it to a point, but you think of like Dan Reed, right? With Pro Wrestling Eve, right? Eve over there in the UK. That he runs an all women's promotion. He does it all the time, but he knows wrestling. He's been in wrestling forever, and he knows women, and he knows women's wrestling, and like that's his thing. So yeah, I mean, it can be done by men. I'm not saying that only women should ever do anything with women's wrestling. I think that's totally against my point of equality, right? I think that's totally against it. A lot of people go, "Oh, you hate men." No, I just want there to be more even, Yeah. But yeah, if they put the money in and they want to teach their fans, put their money where their mouth is, it can be done, and it has been done.
Yeah.
Stardom does it every single day. It can be done, but they have to want to do it. And sometimes, yes, your gates may not be as big, or your ratings, but you have to teach your fans.
Yep.
You have to do that jump of faith and go, well, whether or not we get those ratings, we're going to do it. And, pay-per-views don't rely on NBC Universal. They don't rely on TBS and TNT. So do a pay-per-view then. If TV companies are breathing down your neck about ratings, okay, well then do it on pay-per-view. Yeah. Do a women's Forbidden Door. Like, why was there only one women's match on Forbidden Door and it was 2 AEW women? What is going on? So it can be done. And I know across the board, there are so many fans that just fantasy book this thing because they want it. So I think it's an excuse to say, oh, it's never going to pull. It has, and it will. They just
I don't understand that.
I'm going to date myself again, Mike. I'm really going to date myself. I would like to see that pay-per-view. And then when you buy the pay-per-view, you give them your address, you get them whatever, like when the WWE used to give those chintzy little toys off, right? Whatever it was, like the chintzy little stuff, you send in your receipt or whatever, and they send you the stuff back.
Or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many openings for avenues in marketing that they haven't even touched because they don't want to take the time to invest in it and do it. Like, I think that it would be way more successful than some of the stuff that they're half-assing right now if they just went full ass and figured it out. And little things like that. Yeah, unique T-shirts, like a box, like PWTs does a box, and you buy the pay-per-view, and we send you whatever. Like there's just so much there. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you are 100% correct when you stated, and correct me if I restate this wrong, is that the money isn't there, right? So I understand now it's a publicly traded company. There's that, but you hit the nail on the head, is that there's not enough of us, right,
Yeah.
making the clamor. There's not enough of us asking for that, and it's not because we're not here. Like we're here. We want to see these matches. We want to watch them happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think when the rubber meets the road, like we're all fantasy booking this, like why aren't we out there on Twitter like, hey, where's our next women's revolution? Where's the next thing, right? I'm going to say George Carroll in NXT. Where's our next thing, right? So I think it's on us a lot, and it's an honor. Again, I'm going to keep repeating this for you to be here, and because girls get left out of a lot of shit just because they're girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a preschool teacher, so my job is to make sure that these kids, as they grow up, are kind, are caring, and understand they can be whoever they want to be, whenever they want to be it, and not put a label on it.
Mm-hmm.
But this may come off as brash, but the carny in pro wrestling is still there.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
The good old boy system will always be there, and I think it's going to take a very strong group of women, and I think Mickie James doing what she did and booking it, and some other of these females at some point, if they want to, they'll find a way.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to have that platform for people like Mickie James and Sarah Del Rey to impart other parts of their knowledge base to the next generation is only going to make this product better and better and better. And if a company isn't smart enough to see that, then it's hard for me to support. That's why I spend my weekends with GCW or Beyond or Defy or wherever I'm at, because I want my pro wrestling dollars to count. And there, I know they count. Like when they make it, that's great. You're on pay-per-views, you're doing this, you're doing that. That's awesome. But are you still reaching a hand down to the people that are down there? And I don't see that from the men when it comes to the females in this business.
Well, I think you got to think about a couple things. One, anybody in AEW who believes that the ratings aren't there should be fucking fired. I mean, 100%. I was in the Alamo Dome for Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker in the cage. That motherfucking place went ape shit when Thunder Rosa won. I mean, I've been to a bunch of wrestling events. There was 15,000 people there. The mariachi music hits. It's in Texas, so everybody's hooting and hollering. We love it. Rosa comes out. The match is fantastic. She wins in her adopted hometown, and we lose our shit. I mean, for 15 minutes, Thunder Rosa was getting cheers and applause. Yeah. And I mean, standing ovations, women crying, little girls crying. Like, that's the thing I don't understand. Anybody who says women's wrestling doesn't draw ratings is full of shit. Because I can name you 3 examples right off the top of my head that are better than almost any men's match I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Bayley versus Sasha, the Iron Woman match. Amazing. I mean,
my favorite.
Fantastic. Trish and Lita, when they main evented Raw, historic. Absolutely historic. And then the Mickie James, Trish Stratus WrestleMania match. I mean, those are just off the top of my head. Like, I don't understand it. And, and again, it's not like I want to take away from men's wrestling. I still love wrestling in general.
Me too.
But I think right now, as a fan, I see women out here hustling so much more. And, hey, I got new merch. Or, hey, here's my 8x10. Or, hey, here's this. Here's the show I'm on. And some male wrestlers, it gets like this in every job. We knew about it in the military. Some male wrestlers are just lazy as fuck and don't want to promote anything. And I'm like, dude, you're not begging, but you're asking to be put on shows. And then you're not promoting the show.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird.
Why would I book you? You're not doing anything. Right. And I think it's so insane. I think we're on a better path because I think with Hunter in charge of WWE, I think the good old boy system is going to shrink because he has 3 or 4 daughters. His wife is still, was until she resigned, was the most powerful woman in that company, right? Like, I'm not saying Triple H is a feminist by any mean, but I think he's smart enough to understand what he had with Bayley and Sasha. He's smart enough to understand you could put Becky Lynch against anybody, and that match is going to bang.
Yep.
He's also smart enough to know that if you tease intergender stuff, like when Baron Corbin hit Becky Lynch end of days, he's smart enough to know, oh shit, they might be doing it. Let me tune in a little bit longer, right? So I think things are changing, but I do think, organizations, publications like PWI, when they do women's list, and it's specifically women, right? I think it gives a chance. Like, I didn't know who Max the Impaler was. I didn't know who a bunch of people were. And now, anytime I see, whether it's GCW, and I don't watch GCW because I'm not a death match fan, but I don't care where she's at. GCW, Japan, local indies, like, I'm gonna watch Max the Impaler, and I learned about it through I learned about them through PWI. I want to get their pronouns right.
I was gonna say, yeah, you got it. Thank you.
But
being 47, that's hard for me, and I'm just going to admit it. That's a cultural bias that I have, and I'm trying to learn it. So good job on you, Mike.
Hard for me too, but yeah, it is. It's hard to learn.
It is, and I want to be, obviously, I want to be as inclusive and language inclusive and pronoun inclusive as possible.
Yeah.
But I think you have people like Maria Kanellis, Mickey James, Thunder Rosa, Jazz, who also runs another independent promotion out here in San Antonio. You have these women who are out there who are like, all right, look, if I just leave and I don't impart my knowledge, wrestling's going to go away, or it will go back to being an all boys club. So you have these, what's cool in bigger wrestling markets like a Texas, because Texas is ginormous, is you have the ability to see somebody like a Dulce Tormenta from El Paso. You have Jasmine Allure coming down from Austin, Maddie Rankowski. Like, you have all these women that are interchangeable throughout the state. And now you're starting to see him. Oh, Maddie's on AEW all the time. Genocide is in NWA, like the Woad, like all these people. I think there's so much work to do. So much. I'm sick of seeing 30-second women's matches. I'm over it. It's so dumb. But I think we're in a better place than we were when any of us started as fans, right? I mean, significantly better place.
Yeah.
But like you said, the carny is still a thing. And you still have some wrestlers who feel like they can get away with whatever they want in locker rooms and talk to women or even other men however they want, and the sexual harassment and all the problems that go with wrestling. I think what my favorite part about this whole kind of revolution of women's wrestling is we're starting to see scumbag carnies get held accountable for being scumbag carnies, whether it's a promoter or wrestler, a fan, doesn't matter. And as a dad with a daughter who she loves wrestling, that's what I want. I want it to be family inclusive. I want it to be somewhere that I feel like I can take my daughter to be safe and have a good time. So I think I said all of that. Sorry, I like to hear my own voice.
That's okay. That's all right.
I said all of that to basically say, like, I kind of agree with both of you guys in that I think there's way more room to be expanded. I think if you do it right, you could run a women's only company in a really big market if it's done right. So I think we're on the steps, but I think I think we as wrestling fans, Yeti, it comes to me and you more so as men, right? Because
agreed.
It's the men who aren't watching women's wrestling. It's the look at demographics for WWE. Their target demographic is 18 to 49 men. Higher spending power, advertising, all of that stuff, right? That 18 to 49-year-old audience, unfortunately, isn't hyping up the women's matches because like you said, AEW and other promotions aren't pushing women's wrestling. AEW runs women's wrestling like WWE did 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's your intermission. It's time to go get your popcorn. It's this, it's that. And I'm like, you have Ruby Riott, you have Sheeta, you have Britt Baker, you have all these women that I could name that are legit headliners. Like if they go to WWE, they will be banging on pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't get it. I just don't understand. And a lot of that, like I said, Yeti, is on guys like you and I, old school, over 30 years old. We need to, kind of put out on Twitter like, hey, this is the women's wrestling I'm watching. Here's a clip. Here, highlight this. Check this out. Like, you remember?
I did. I looked back at our interviews, and we are pretty even. Yeah. I think we're actually heavily weighted more towards females than we are males. I haven't looked through all of it, and that makes me feel good. Because not only, and this is my kind of one of my last questions for you, Kristen, is we didn't get to all of them. We never do. Like I asked 2 or 3 and then we just go.
That's okay.
Is like we want to talk to good humans, and we also want to talk to good talent.
Mm-hmm.
Are there people that you have had the chance to, like, this is your chance to be a homer, right? Are there people you look at and go, you're a good worker, but you're an even better human? Are there people out there like that you can be a homer for, or are you not allowed to do that?
No, I am. I thought about that question, and it's like, I can think of, like, it'd be easier for me to say, who is it? Not that I'm going to do that, but it would be easier for me to say, who is the troublemaker? And that's like, maybe they say some ist stuff, right? They're like, they just don't have good values, or they don't have values that match mine, or, they're not safe in the ring, or they sit on Twitter all day, every day, and just bash other women. Those are the people that, like, okay, but as far as, like, I don't know, I feel like all women have to, most women, if they're smart, especially in the indies, they have to almost be good people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people are not, most promotions are not going to hire you if you're a piece of shit. Like, you see Tessa Blanchard, right? She fell off the face of the earth, right? So most promotions, they don't want that kind of PR mess, right? They don't want that. And whether or not they like the person or not, they just don't want it. No one's going to come to your show. So I think women in the business, especially in the indies, have to be at least polite. They have to be good people. And, I really pick through women, right? Like I do interviews. I will get quotes for various stuff. I highlight women. So I do a lot of research on them. And I've never ran, once, but I've never, like, I don't talk to her anymore, but I've never ran across any woman that really gave me a big deal, like really gave me trouble. They're all so grateful for the exposure, especially indie women. Every time I do a column or a feature, especially in PWI, these women have been reading PWI since they were little. They're so happy. And so when I give them a spotlight, they're like, yes. And so, you think of Billy Starks, right? She's incredible human being, so young, but just really, with the Big Starks brand, really pushes positivity in wrestling. That's a big thing for her. And, she's so young, and she comes from a generation where I think that's really key, right? Like, maybe in millennials and older, like, we're just whatever, but
we're dicks. Let's just call it what it is.
I'm a dick. I know. But that's a generation. Or you think of, like, Riley Shepard, who anytime we did anything with her, where she was on any lists or we interviewed her, anything, she would DM me and go, oh my God, thank you so much. To Gail Kim, who has looked out for me before, who has DM'd me and said, look, just reword this tweet or something. Like, I have never really talked to a woman who was a real dick. Even the one I'm thinking of, who is kind of a dick, when she talked to me, she wasn't a dick. It wasn't until later. But it's even like, so I interviewed Becky Lynch, and you think, okay, Becky Lynch is the top of the top. She's got 15 minutes. I don't know that she doesn't care, but she's really busy. When I did an interview, she had 15 exact minutes, and then they were going to do the rehearsal. So she could have been like mean and like, let's go. Like, I don't have time. And she was so polite. They had to reschedule the time like 3 times. And she immediately came on and she said, I'm so sorry that we had to reschedule. Like, I have never met a woman who's not humble, because they have to be. I mean, they have to be, because no one's going to hire a bitch. And there are so few spots that the least thing you want to do is make bad connections with promoters, with media, with anybody, because you're not going to get the coverage and you're not going to get the jobs. So maybe jerks I can count on one hand, but everyone else, they're just so kind. And there are some women, like I'll say Masha, who is all business. So, we had an interview with her and we had like 10 questions and she just ran through them in like 30 seconds. And we're like, what? So some of them are all business, but not a jerk. And every woman that I reached out to for an interview has, let's do it. So again, but that's because they need the exposure. They need it. They need it, especially in the indies. They need it for sales, for merch, for bookings. They need that stuff. And PWI, forget it. They're always so happy to be in PWI. I mean, that's, again, PWI reaches an audience that isn't on Twitter. These are like, I don't want to say, they're basic fans or anything, but these are fans that read magazines. There are fans who don't know who they are because they maybe not watching GCW or Beyond or anybody, that's really important to these women. So yeah, I mean, I could list a million, but I think they're all pretty great, frankly. Maybe it's a cop out, but
no, it's not a cop out.
I don't think so either, because the one bad interview I've had, I don't even care about calling him out, was Nick Aldis. I mean, he was a straight dickhead.
Really?
Straight dickhead to me. Like anytime I would bring up Mickey, it was, I don't want to talk about that. Or this was, in matter of fact, this was after they promoted in St. Louis for Empower. I asked specifically about how does it feel to be working with your wife and have her booking, her first real big national show, and he didn't want to talk about it. And then, okay, let me bring up some old school British wrestling that I know. Didn't want to talk about it. I've never interviewed a female wrestler or referee, or I've had photographers on, whatever. I've never interviewed any female involved with the business and had anything less than an amazing experience.
Same.
It's always been men who have been complete dickheads, like, oh, I don't need the podcast. I don't need this. Like, come on, dude. I know you're Nick Aldis and you used to be in TNA, but now you're in NWA, not WWE. Calm down. You're just a guy. Like, calm down.
I'll say, I mean, he could have, so knowing now about how Billy Corgan was just kind of an ass to Mickey James and everything, and then you hear, Tony Khan paid the way. And I mean, everybody was giving them a lot of shit for doing this show. Yeah. I will say I have worked personally with Mickey and Nick Aldis on websites and stuff. And I will say on a personal level, they are super sweet. Like, and I know, Nick could have just been a jerk that day or whatever. I'm not saying that he wasn't.
He literally came back. He had just come back from promoting in St. Louis, and they were driving back to wherever it is that they live from St. Louis. Yeah. So the interview went on. It was fine. It was not a great episode. And I don't hate Nick Aldis or anything like that. I didn't take it personally. It just was like, I got fucking big timed right now. Like, this is how it felt like I got big timed. I was like,
and I don't even know that Nick Aldis does that many interviews, to be honest. So
no,
I was super lucky when I reached out to him. He wanted me to promote his vitamin company or something like that, and I did it. He was like, yeah, I'll give you an hour, no problem, no charge, no nothing. So I'm very grateful for the interview. I just think like he might have been exhausted and everything else going on. And now I didn't know about Billy Corgan being a complete piece of shit to Mickey James.
Dude.
But that doesn't surprise me because Billy Corgan was a complete piece of shit in TNA. So I guess I can kind of give him a mulligan on that. But like I was saying, I've never had a woman come on. And it doesn't matter. Thunder Rosa. Like, I've had a chance to sit down and talk and interview Thunder Rosa, which I never put out because she asked me not to. I've also had the chance to interview Jasmine Allure, the Renegade Twins, like some of these women who are on the come up now.
Mhm.
And like you said, every single time I get done with an interview, thank you so much. And I only have like 850 followers, right, on Twitter and stuff. But they're like, dude, you don't know what this exposure means to me.
Yeah.
They're so grateful, so humble. And, you know, I think a lot of it too is, like you said, it's out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Men, if this is what gets me about watching pro wrestling, indie pro wrestling shows, men will go in there cocky as shit, chest all out, and just, he's got a swag about him, or he's untouchable, or that's part of his character. If a woman goes in there and her chest is all out and she's like, I'm the shit and I know I'm the shit, she's a bitch. We don't want to work with her. Like, hold on, wait. Just because they have different genitals, it's different somehow? Like, how did this work?
Mm-hmm.
It just, it bugs me out. But I'm so glad there are people like you, and I'm so glad there are organizations like yours that are pushing and kind of making the way for women to hit the main event scene and hit not even just the main event scene, but the bigger wrestling scene in general,
Mm-hmm.
and get more eyes out there, because it shows little girls like my 8-year-old, like my daughter. Every time we come back from a Mission Pro show, Dad, I want to be a wrestler so bad.
Mm.
Dad, I want to be a wrestler. Dad, I want to be Thunder Rosa. Dad,
so cute.
And it's so, organizations like yours and Mission Pro, and, you know, all the other organizations that are pro women wrestling, like, I'm rooting so hard for the success of them, and I support as much as I can, because it lets my daughter dream.
Yeah.
Like, I love the women wrestling. I think it's dope. I think women's wrestling is on fire right now. Tag team, singles, it doesn't matter. But as a father, the more important thing to me is I've seen my daughter drawing her ring gear. Like,
that's so cute.
It's so dope. And that's what organizations like yours do and Mission Pro do. So for me, it's super dope. And I wish you nothing but continued and utmost success, man. It's been.
Thank you. I appreciate
Can
it.
we can I steal you for 5 more minutes, because I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
Do you like when? So there's your committee, of course, through PWI, and you're talking about the 150.
Mm-hmm.
How? Because we always have this debate, JP and I, and this Mike, and we have this debate. Like, how do you establish criteria, and then how do you break that down in PWI? Is that something that you can talk about, or is that?
Oh yeah, no, that's. I mean, the more people that understand the criteria, the better.
I'm a huge fan of criteria, because I'm definitely type A, and I want to be able to compare things and not use my cultural biases and lenses to be biased towards my favorites. So can you? Final question really is, like, can you touch a little bit? And I swear to God, I'm not going to ask a follow up, because I could probably we could be here all night.
Mind. I mean, what am I missing on Dynamite? Right, the one woman's match. It's fine.
Yeah, these are the new Wednesday Night Wars: Irish Whip versus AEW. Like, can you talk a little bit about the criteria and just what it is?
Yeah. So the criteria itself was started when the 500 was started. So at the 90s, like, it was a long time ago. So it hasn't changed much. I think maybe the title, like the way the title is described for at least the 500 has been changed a little bit, but it hasn't really changed. I will say, and I don't know if this has been revealed, but it doesn't matter. Next year, we're going to, the 500 should be a singles competition list. And we've sort of, we put like FTR and the Young Bucks, and it's like they have one singles match. Why are they on this list? Not that they don't deserve it, but like, it doesn't make sense when they're not doing a lot of
singles,
of that. Yeah. So the tag team list is developed. It will probably increase, I think. And then that's for tag teams. So, the criteria has been around for a while. We're sort of kind of being more specific in it so that it's really, like you said, separate. And so, I mean, the criteria, I think, breaks down into subjective and objective, right? And we start with objective. That's really important. So we start with, title reigns, number of titles, the length, you know, like how busy they've been, right? So activity. So like, you know, Stardom's got like 90 matches versus somebody who might have 10. And the only reason that really matters is that it's easier to determine how good someone is if they have more matches, right? So, and that's the same thing with strength of competition, which means if Stardom is fighting someone's fighting, which was Shuri, right? Every single person on the roster, it tells us, okay, she's better than every single person on the roster rather than somebody who just fights the same people over and over again. And that was sort of the reason for Shuri over Bianca. And it's not Bianca's fault. She doesn't book the matches. But, you know, if you're fighting the same people over and over again, how can we tell how you've grown or whatnot? So those are important. And, you know, I'm trying to think of the other ones. So that, right? And then you think of subjective stuff. So push. And that is also a little objective. I mean, you can tell who's being pushed. It's like titles, right? Those are the people, or they're in the title scene. So, you know, like Liv Morgan. And so those people who are being pushed and we can kind of tell, but in the end it is subjective a little bit, right? Or influence. So you think like Bianca, she has influence outside of WWE. She's a Black woman. She means a lot to Black fans. She did Fenty work. She did all this other work. Her influence is not just wrestling. And we sort of thought that with Shuri too. Like, you know, she means a lot to a demographic, you know, of Asian fans or Japanese fans, right? So there's certain, you know, like Shuri essentially brought a lot of Joshi to the US because people were like, she's so good. And then they would start watching Stardom. So that's part of it. At the end of the day, now I'll tell you in a 4-hour
You just described me to a T.
Right. So we start with like, you know, and then we start with top promotions, right? Because they get TV time. They're going to be known, right? The casual fans are going to know who Bianca Belair is. So we start with the top with TV, and then, you know, but not everybody gets used. Like you think of AEW, there was a few women who didn't get used because they weren't on TV. So, you know, you go down the list. It's easier to start at the top because you're looking at the big titles and you're going, okay, who has had the titles and how long have they had it and how many title reigns, and then you move down from there. Stardom's usually we think of at the top two because their competition's better, right? And then you get down to the bottom of the list, which is so much harder because it might be one match, it might be, you know, whatever, it might be one day on a title reign, and we don't consider intergender. It's just women's competition. So there's people like Masha who might be number 3, but she fights so many men. Same thing with Trish Adora. She's so high on the 500, but because she does so much, which is like kind of shitty in a way because that's what they can get.
Yeah.
Like that's what they can get. But they go on the 500, right? So we really try to start with objective and then go to subjective. And I'll tell you in a 4-hour call, we usually get through the 150 and then we'll go back and go through it. And of the 4 hours, 1 hour was just Shuri and Bianca. And then we still had email chains later about it. I mean, it came down to Shuri had a better record. She had better win-loss record. She competed in more matches. Bianca had not competed against different people enough. But her influence was so strong that was her main argument. It was like, okay, numbers versus influence. And we discussed it for so long, pros and cons, devil advocate versus who we want. And I'll tell you, I wanted Shuri for a lot of reasons, but it just came down to numbers. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you have to go with because that is objective. It's not, oh, we think this person was pushed extra great.
Yeah.
And it may not be obvious that they were. So, and you know, in the bottom half of the list, it's almost all numbers because these are indie women that maybe not be on TV. So you really have to go by numbers and title wins and how have they been all over the place, that kind of thing. Like there was a few women who, you know, they went to the UK for the first time. So that's huge, right? But yeah, I mean, we take the criteria very seriously. There are a lot of people who think that we just meet for 30 minutes and we just run a list and that's it. And oh my God, no. I mean, it is a whole month of going back over that list. of really watching. I mean, that's when I really, really watch everything of women's wrestling because, you know, like I said, there might be somebody who hops on the list. There might be someone who loses their title and they're off the list, or especially at the bottom, you know, they might win a tournament or whatever. And so you have to consider that. And so, I mean, the criteria is there for a reason. It's always been there. We don't make it up. It's there for the 500. It's there for the tag teams. It does not change except for the division. You know, are you fighting in a women's division or are you, you know, and we did kind of make it like so for instance, Max the Impaler, right? It's a them.
Yep.
Not technically a
Right.
she. But they fight in women's divisions. They fight in women's promotions for women's titles. So that we sort of switched up so that there wasn't any confusion about that. But I mean, the criteria is, I think it's great. I think it makes our job a little bit harder, but then ideally people wouldn't complain. But I promise you there's not a lot of people that look at that criteria.
Well, I really think like if you're not creating controversy, like Papa E says, is then you're not creating cash.
What did Bischoff say? I think it's crazy too, is the fact that like it's so hard to be objective about a sport that's based on make pretend. Essentially,
it's a kayfabe list. I mean, that's what we say that it's a kayfabe list because
absolutely
it's not the fault of these wrestlers. It's not like the wrestlers go out and they just fuck up I mean, most of the times, right? They don't just fuck up a match or they don't just drop a title. These are things that are chosen by promoters.
And if they don't go by that, they're going to be blackballed out of the industry.
Right. It's kayfabe. We consider it a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
You know, who's being pushed right now? Who's doing really well right now? Not who's the best wrestler in the world. Because if 7 people are doing that, it's going to be like the same list every year. I mean, it doesn't change. Like Mercedes Martinez doesn't go from like a legend to suddenly shitty one year. Like it doesn't work that way. So if we did the best wrestler, that would also be incredibly subjective.
Oh my God.
So it has to be kayfabe. I mean, it has to be that way.
You would have to take 6 months to determine the best wrestler. Like,
how would you even determine that?
There's so many, like, I think if you were to do something like that, God, that would be an undertaking. But if you were to do something like that, you'd have to do it by company. And you'd have to do kind of like, okay, this is the best man, woman in WWE, TNA, ROH, even though they're AEW, but whatever. And then the problem with that is your indie wrestlers get no account because they can't hold a mark to Bianca Belair, who's wrestled in front of 130,000 people. Like, and I think for me, that 130,000 people that she wrestled in front of, or whatever it was, kind of outranks a bunch of stuff. And that 130,000 people may not matter to you as much as it does to me. So the subjectiveness of this list, this is why I love the PWI lists.
Me too.
Because I'm like, I know the neckbeards that are sitting in their mother's basement right now with highlighters, just like, they got this shit fucking wrong. They got this shit fucking wrong. Like, it is, dude, you are essentially getting pissed off about ballet, like about a choreographed sport. And you're being shitty to people because they're giving their opinions, subjective or objective.
That's kayfabe.
About a sport. And I'm all about
we write blurbs.
And I hate people like that. Like, I smoke way too much weed to be angry at anybody. So when other people are shitty to other people, it blows my fucking mind. Like,
I can't,
wrestling.
There are people who are pretty respectful, and there are people who I even am friends with who ask, and there are people who ask every year, why isn't there a mixed list? And I explain patiently, and I'm like, look, I'll answer all your questions as long as you were respectful to me. And I appreciate the fans. Like, there are people who are like, oh, why isn't this person like 3 places above? And I appreciate the fandom. Like, this is what keeps me in the job. This is what keeps us in a job. Like, we need the fandoms to survive. And so do the wrestlers, which is way more important. We need the wrestlers to survive, or we don't have wrestling
at all.
So fandoms super important. But yeah, I mean, it's always a struggle. I don't get a lot of hate on the 500 because I mean, yes, I'm there for the whole meeting, but I don't pick a lot of men. I did have some say with AC Mac at number 25, which was like
Nice.
yeah, I was super proud of that. Or like, they'll start going through the list and I'm like, wait a minute, where's Jay White? And so there's always that, but I'm there for the women. That's really what I'm there for. And so I don't get a lot of hate for that. For the women's list, absolutely. But it is a kayfabe list, and we do the best we can, but we are a committee. I mean, we can't, and I'll tell you too, like, if there's somebody like in the old committee, like not last year, but the year before, who couldn't make it, or is an expert in Mexican or luchadora stuff, we, Kevin will say, okay, does this look okay? Does this look all right? Like, are these people in the right places? Because we don't know everything. There are some luchadors that I pay attention as much as I can.
Oh, but you guys are on that pedestal. Those that you guys are the know all, be all, end all.
The problem is there's so much wrestling out there that there's no specific, like, if you don't know who Isaiah Broner is because you don't watch Michigan wrestling, you don't get the Michigan independent scene. I know him because he's wrestled in Texas for Pele Pro. So I know him because of that. But there's so much fucking wrestling. Like, I mean, New Japan by itself, and then Stardom, and then how many other promotions just in Japan? Plus Britain, plus Germany, plus Mexico, plus the States. India's about to get big wrestling. India's turning into a big wrestling territory. Like, there's so much international shit.
Europe.
You can't, Europe. You can't sit down as a committee and say, I saw this one guy in Bangladesh one time. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like, I understand you got fans, but calm your tits. It's not that serious.
Well, everyone's an expert. Yeah, everyone's.
I lied. Last question. I have to ask this question.
That's good.
Green's always lying.
I told her like with talent, like, we don't. And I'm not feeding questions, right? But I wanted to make sure I fed her some questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've only asked 3. Like, this is Tangent Issues Weekly is pretty much what we should rename the thing.
I mean, just between you and me, they should just call the podcast ADD. They might.
Right.
Well, and I'm ADHD, so
she's ADHD too. So we all have our battles. So I've got to ask you before last question, because I lied. I'm sorry. And like I'm honest, I'm bad because ADHD is my thing. So it's like, I never want to go over an hour because I know people are busy and this and that, but I don't get this opportunity very often to ask the questions that, and you to take your time, but I've got to know, and this is I'm letting you be a homer now this time.
Okay.
Do you have your Mount Rushmore of females? Do you have one?
God. I thought so much about this. It's 4, right?
Yes.
Right? 4?
Yes, 4.
I don't know. I live in the States, but I have no idea. Yeah, I thought so much about it. And it was like, because, I'm a fan of the past. Like, even though I started not too long ago, obviously, if people think I'm an expert, I should probably watch historical wrestling, right? So, it's like, there's people in the past, there's people now. And okay, this is the best thing I can come up with, but I'm not, like, if I leave you out, ladies, please don't get mad at me. Something in Bull Nakano, just legendary, right? China, who broke all sorts of barriers for women. I mean, she really was the first, like, at least on TV, intergender woman, right? Io Shirai, which I thought brought a lot of, she was a pillar of Stardom. She's one of the first 3 people. There's Kairi, Io, and then Mayu Iwatani, right? So those, like, the pillar, and then she also brought a lot of that to the States, and is just an incredible person. And I will say Candice LeRae. And I'm saying Candice LeRae, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, she's not being." Yes, no, absolutely. When they brought her back, they're doing nothing important with her right now, which makes me angry. Because if you watch 2012 PWG, you go back there and watch it. Oh my god! And we will not talk about her partner, who will not be named.
Oh,
but
he threatened to sue me.
If you just Google Candice LeRae and PWG, the first thing you see is just blood covering her, and she kicked the ass of the Young Bucks. And I think she was paired up with Chris Hero for a while. And
she's fought Kevin Owens.
Yes, yeah. She was just killing all the men everywhere, just killing all of them. And I think, yes, she's newer, but I think she set a standard, frankly, on the West Coast, but also in Indies. She set a standard. She was intergender before a lot of women intergender, and Lufisto too. I mean, if I had a fifth, Lufisto is incredibly important, especially in Canada. As far as women's wrestling goes, she broke a lot of barriers there too, and yeah. But I think Candice LeRae would probably be my fourth, and it's so hard.
Yeti, what about you?
First of all, I want to say thank you for bringing all that stuff about Candice LeRae, because I don't think she gets
nearly
the credit or the chances. And just so many things as far as Japanese pro wrestling and how when they come to the States, they're not properly used, especially females. But to answer your question, mine is I've thought about this so many times, and it changes every so now and then, and it just happens. It's Sarah Del Rey, Lufisto, and I always waver on my fourth, but for me, I think the biggest one that made this new happen is Charlotte Flair. Like that's my four, and I put Charlotte on there.
Said three.
Not to discount anything Candice
Yeah, we
has
missed
done.
one of yours because you froze.
You said three, so there's.
Oh, I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
Who's right before Charlotte?
It's okay. Sarah Del Rey, right? Lufisto, right? Mickie James, okay, and then the other one is Charlotte Flair. When I think of professional wrestling and is the catalog that I've been able to watch, China was great. Like and you're right. Like this is the hardest thing for me to do. Is China is usually on mine or it's somewhere on there. But when I think of body and work, and hers was cut short, that's my criteria, right?
Right.
So that's mine. So Mike, what do you have? Like a Mount Rushmore? Do you?
I have. So my number 4 is Hamada. I love Hamada. I watched her when she was in TNA. Holy fuck, that woman did magical shit. Like she made that six-sided ring. I mean, it was her bitch. Like it was like she was an artist, and it was her canvas. Like I love Hamada. Mickie James is on there for me. Jazz is my number 2.
Nice.
And Thunder for me, just because this is more personal in the way she treated my daughter, but Thunder Rosa is my number 1.
Thunder Rosa is a great human being.
She's, oh my God. So we went to a Mission Pro show, and my daughter painted half of her face like Thunder Rosa. And the entire night, anytime Thunder Rosa would see her, she would pick her up and give her a hug and be like, "This is my friend." Thunder Rosa, like that's why I love Mission Pro so much. You're not getting bullshit. Like there was so they do it in a little Salvation, not a little, but it's a big gym, but a Salvation Army gym.
Yeah.
Literally 10 seconds down the street from my house. And there was a male wrestler, because they're starting to feature more male wrestling on their cards as well.
Yeah.
Talk about two sides of the coin tonight.
Yeah, no shit. But they there's a male wrestler who, and I don't know who he was. I think he was a trainee for Hybrid. He said something that was like super inappropriate for families. And, you know, I'm pretty forgiving on language because I like the word fuck a lot. But when there are 6, 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds there, like kind of pay attention more. And Thunder Rosa literally came from their gorilla position, pulled his ass to the back, like over by the gorilla position where me and my daughter were saying. And she literally was like, "Look, you're a grown man. You do whatever you want, but this is my show, and it's a family-friendly show. Entrances, there's no cursing in women. There's no cursing in anybody's entrances. We do that for a reason." She was like, "Look, this is your one, and like, I'm not mad at you. You know, I'm paying you, whatever. We have a business relationship, but understand that conduct is not okay at my show. And if it happens again, you will not be booked on my show."
Well, she used to work with troubled youth before wrestling.
Yeah, she was a counselor, right?
Yeah, and she's had a lot of kids die. So I think like family and children are really, and I have pulled big time, but I have her phone number, and I've often called her, and I've often texted her, and she's just she just appreciates fans, honestly.
She's such a great.
So I'm just going to clarify. When I asked the question, like worker and human being, I think I got the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah. So an hour and a half. I really, Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time. I don't want to take more reading, but I want you to stick around. But really, for International Women's Day, this was a true honor for me. It's an honor for Wrestling News Source, and it's an honor for the Irish Whip as a whole.
And this
to not only, and Mike, not only to celebrate women's wrestling in general, but just the fact that we as dads, fans, and dudes that have daughters, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for
Absolutely.
being so passionate about it.
Absolutely.
And thank you for sharing all that with us, because it makes a difference whether we think so or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really low on myself. So anytime someone says nice things about me, I'm like, but I appreciate it, because I really, those are the things you think of when you're producing content. You're like, nobody's listening. So that's very nice. I think people over exaggerate how great I am, but it's very nice. And I had a really good time, hour and a half, whatever. I had a really good time, and I'm glad I could be on, especially today.
Good.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for Kristen, Mike, JP's not here. TW Mafia, thanks for listening. Make sure you follow at Bell to Bells, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, PW Insider. Like, it's your source. They're professionals. They're the experts. They know what they're doing. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. As always, like and subscribe, and we will talk at you soon.